Hey guys, Mr. V over here doing a book review today for Helter, Skelter, The True Story of the Manson Murders by Vincent Bugliosi. This is the nonfiction book review about the Manson murders, also known as the Tate LaBianca murders, and you see what the murders are, the trial, and his conviction. Now, before reading this book, it's a nonfiction book, I would say you want to be over the age of 18 because this has some very graphic crime scenes, as it was murders. It was multiple murders, not just one. Multiple murders, and there's some very graphic crime scenes, and he goes in depth with the crime scenes. You even have pictures in the book where he shows you some pictures of the crime scene, shows many pictures of suspects, everything. But it goes very in depth, which is why I would say you want to be over the age of 18. So, let's get into the book review. So this was a very interesting book because I was recommended this book. After I finished In Cold Blood by Truman Capote, this was one of the recommendations, and I decided to give it a shot because I had always known the name Charles Manson. He is referenced a lot in the media, and I knew he was a cult leader, I knew he was a psycho, I knew he did multiple murders, and I'd say he's one of the most well-known mass murderers. And despite knowing that, I knew they caught him, I knew all that, despite knowing that, I actually did not know much about him beyond that. I just knew the name. I didn't know about the Tate LaBianca murders, really. I just knew that. That's why I decided to give it a shot, and I'm glad I did, because I learned a lot while reading this book. Because one cool thing about this book was the prosecutor is actually the author. So you get a great first-hand account of everything. Like, you get a nice behind-the-scenes look, and it's very in-depth and well-researched. But he also does a great job of capturing your interest while you read the book. It's not one of these boring true crime stories. It is very interesting how he wrote it out. Because you get the in-depth look, I said it's a first-hand look, but you also see the investigation and how in-depth it goes. Because you basically follow the cops while they solve it. And that is a lot of fun when you are following the cops while they do it. Because you get to see the evidence, the backgrounds of the victims, the questioning, while they pick up suspects, while they're eliminating suspects, the theories to why the murders happened, and how they dealt with the media. You're following them that whole time. And that was very interesting. And it was a lot of fun following them. Because you get to see basically how these cops solve it. But this is also a very a well-known case, but you get to see kind of how cops solve, I think, many cases. But what also made this one very interesting was just the tremendous amount of media attention this got. And even the president, Richard Nixon at the time, even he had commented on Charles Manson, Rolling Stone magazine. They commented to where everyone knew who that was at the time. And it was not easy dealing with that media, though. When you're trying to prosecute someone, it's not easy. So you get to see how they did that. But this was not only, you get to see that, but this is also a very crazy case. It really was. It was multiple murders, and the crime scenes were very graphic. It was very sad. Yet, it almost went unsolved. That was really crazy, that it almost went unsolved. And he shows you how. But when you're reading it, it's fun knowing that they solved it. But while you're reading it, you're wondering how, considering he shows you the facts of how it almost went unsolved. So you get to see it unfold, and you see how every small bit of evidence helped them. And that's why I say this was a very interesting book. It goes in depth, but it was very interesting, and that's why it caught your attention. What's also cool is he discusses the trial in depth. Now, I should say though, the trial was actually very interesting. It was not boring. I was worried going into the trial, but it was a very interesting trial, not only because of the case and how crazy the case is, but Charles Manson is a crazy figure. Also his followers, because he was a cult leader, they are crazy too. When Charles Manson would shave his head, they would shave theirs. When he put a mark on his forehead, they did the same thing. And they would shout things in court, and it was just crazy. And what was also made this very interesting was that it was not an easy conviction. I always thought this was an easy case. I always heard his name, I knew he was in prison, so I always thought it was very easy. I thought that he either confessed or that it was just a super easy conviction. Yet it shows that it was a very difficult case, and how they had to present the evidence, and how they got people to speak. Because some people refused to speak because they were so loyal to Manson, but other people refused to speak because they were being threatened and they were afraid of Manson. So that's why it was just very interesting while you're reading it. And I said it's crazy when reading it because Charles Manson is crazy, and you see how crazy his cult is too. And you just see like almost the behind the scenes of how he got control of them, how much control he had. I already said some of the things, I already gave you some things, but you learn more when you read it. And you see how obsessed his members were with him. That even when they were separated from him and he was on trial, how loyal they were, how they would refuse to speak, or how they got messages to each other, and like they like got secret messages to each other while he was on trial, to where when you're reading it, it really almost feels fictional. And that's what was crazy about this too, and it was a lot of fun reading that as well. So there are a few things I did not like about the book though. One of the biggest things was that there are a lot of names, because he does a lot of research and he goes very in depth. You can see this is over 600 pages, like 650 pages. So it goes very in depth for the trial, or for the conviction and the murders. It goes very in depth in the trial, everything, sorry. But there are so many names in this, because the other thing that made it tough was that in his cult, they had their regular name, their real name, but he also gave them like a cult name. For example, he would call them like just Squeaky. That was one of the cult names. And that's what made it tough at times to know who was who, because you were wondering, okay, who was this person, who was involved in what murder, who was going to be testifying, who refused to testify. There are a lot of names when you do that, and it was difficult, and it was hard to narrow down a lot. Luckily, in the very beginning, there's like a 15-page thing of how many different names are. You can see how many names there are. You can at least reference that. That at least helped a bit. But it still was difficult at times, right in the middle of a paragraph. It's hard to continually reference back. So, that was one thing that was a little tough. Another thing that was tough was they are very long chapters. It's incredibly long. Sometimes there's like broken down into like sub-chapters, but still the whole chapter on itself was very long. I read the book and I also listen to the audio at times, and I think the audio, some chapters were like 4 hours. Again, there would be broken segments in the chapter, but again, that still is very difficult. But overall, I found this to be a very interesting book. It's not a light read. It's not a light read at all, because he goes very in depth and there are a lot of facts. And also the crime is just very crazy. But this book is interesting, and it was a very interesting book because it shows everything. It shows who was Charles Manson. Why did he have so much control of those people? The crimes that happened, the investigation, the trial. And even though this was released in the 1970s, he put a chapter in the 1990s, he rewrote a chapter at the very end to talk about what happened throughout the 1970s and throughout the 1980s and even the early 90s, to what happened to some of his other cult people. What happened in their life. They got convicted as well, but what they said about Manson later, when they were older, and some of the people that did not get convicted, what happened to them. So he gives you like an update about what happened after, which is also interesting. So I would say though, if you want to know like who Charles Manson is, but are willing to devote the time to reading a 650-page book, this is a great true crime story. It is. You get to see everything, and you just follow the cops while they do everything, and you follow the prosecutor while he does everything. And the story just really draws you in, and you can see why, despite this murder happening in 1969, people are still talking about it over 50 years later. And you can see that in this book. If you guys have any comments or questions, please post it in the comment section below. As I always love hearing your comments, your opinions. If you guys want to see more book reviews like the one you saw today, hit the subscribe button, as I always upload multiple different book reviews. But thank you for watching today. Go enjoy your reading.